now the I had a situation that just happened yesterday where a customer called and they gave the information for the pickup over the phone, and we sent them a confirmation, and they didn't go over the confirmation, and the address was wrong. But using technology and using systems where we can communicate effectively and easily, it creates a more efficient situation. So that's what I've done over the course of my business. I've always been very aggressive about using, the right type of technology or whatever is available, because I actually learned that back in the day in the lawn care business, that having the right equipment makes work a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
And faster. And actually, in most cases, more efficient, more effective, more, it does it better, more accurate.
Yeah, and it truly does, because I can look at just in my life and in my career, I've been in the SaaS space for truly the last, I would say, 8 or 9 years. And prior to that, there was always a company which I worked for that were using technology to further advance that company. For instance, I remember when I first started in my career, this was early 2011, we had an entire transition over to a new CRM that allowed us to see more visibility into our day-to-day operation, how our accounts were being managed, what were their growth targets, but also where they were pacing as far as the contracts that we had in place. And if we didn't have that, we were essentially just going into every single account blind, and in hopes that they would move forward with the contract agreements, or they would move forward with some of the initiatives in which we had. And so it allowed us to be a lot more, to your point, efficient in our conversations. And so fast forward up to now, working for a SaaS company as opposed to just working for a consumer product goods company, I see both sides of it. What's the back end of the software? How does it work? How's it built? How's it maintained and improved? And then also seeing it on the side where your startup black car operators or independent operators are getting started, but they're not effectively using the tool because they're so used to doing things the old way. To your point, the Stone Ages. Well, what we see is that those clients don't really use the software within a 90-day span. They typically will cancel, and whether it's the end of their business, they just say, well, hey, this industry isn't for me. It's not working. I'm just going to go on to something new. I'm going to go on to another industry or another market. And then they realize that it wasn't the tool because they weren't using the tool. It was really their business practice. And so I think that's a key element that a lot of people need to understand is, yes, I have an idea for the business. I have an idea for what I want to achieve. But if I don't have the right tools in place, I'm essentially just operating blind in hopes that this just magically happens, right? But as an entrepreneur, you know this for sure, that nothing magically happens. You got to go out there, you got to do the work. You talked about sales a little bit earlier as well. If you're not prospecting, you can't increase that clientele, right? And prospecting is multifaceted, right? You can prospect new clients, but you can also prospect prospect referrals within your current client base. Hey, we're offering a 10% referral bonus for any client that gets referred, or whatever promotions that are out there. But when they don't think in that mind of, hey, I have to think like a sales professional, or I have to think like a marketer, or I have to think like I have to go from that independent operator thinking to the enterprise operator. Though I may not be as large, if I want to get there, I have to start thinking that way now, and in the practice, I'll start to see the results.
Yeah, you have to model yourself after. If you want to be great like Kobe Bryant, you got to think about the things that Kobe does to be great. Right? His workout, his eating habits, what are the drills, what type of training, or, so what type of sales approaches do they have? What are their processes? How are they conducting themselves? What are their rates like? You have to look at all those things and then say, hey, this is, if I want to be in the top tier, if I want to, I have to learn how to dance this way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it's recognition. It's recognizing and making the adjustments, with certain things. And so, there's a lot of ways to build and answer questions in this industry, especially when you're getting started. But it's just about recognizing you got to lean forward and try. Maybe find a mentor, use the software. But that's one of the things I think that is unique about what I do with LTA is that I've noticed that there's a gap in what you said in like retention. Maybe on the software is that people don't even know, they don't even understand the values of what can be done with the system, because from an operator viewpoint that has to discover things, it's just a different conversation, right? Than that I bring, because it's I discovered along with the help of the software, but I discovered the value of how this thing can give you that foundational growth that you could not find on your own.
Yeah.
I mean, the interior networking that's available is something that you can do from the very beginning of your business by just getting the software.
Yeah.
And then from there, the hard part of, going out and finding customers, that's the hard part. But going in and using the tools available in the software, this is actually, one up.
Yeah.
And so, that is, that's just something that, most people don't know, and they don't value it. And so that's why they drop off of the software, because they think, oh, I don't need this. And, they're going to mom and pop it, and they're going to, PayPal receipts or take cash. And their mentality is not of the understanding of how this company could be a $500,000 business for you a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're not they look at it as you're just a driver. And, not understanding that this is a business that can really give you some independence that you never could have imagined.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, the one up in Kobe, because huge fan of Kobe, RIP Kobe. I always remember that Kobe was the first one in the gym and the last to leave. He outworked everyone because he knew that if I didn't outwork these other players, then what ends up happening is I lose my chance, or I lose my shot at greatness. And so he had a scope, he had his sights set on greatness. And as you talk about this level or this one up, or even the game of, even in this space, a lot of them get to level one and they can't make it past level one. And so they just quit the game and they say, you know what, this game sucks. It's not for me. I'm going to move on to another game. But the reality is, with that mentor can teach you, this is what you need to do in level one to get to level two. And if you don't have that early on, you're going to make those mistakes. You're going to lose, 9 times out of 10. And then if you're at that 9th time and you're saying, well, you know what, I tried this so many times and it's just not working. And there's fear of reaching out to somebody to look as if, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm immature in the space, or I'm ignorant of what I should be doing next. It doesn't demean you to seek help, right? And I think we could talk a little bit about the premise of LTA, because ultimately, as a lot of these operators and drivers and independent operators, if they're not seeking that training and that growing, and this just isn't to the transportation industry, this is across the board for any entrepreneurship or any business owner. If you're not looking to find areas where you can improve or get leadership or mentorship, then you'll find yourself basically saying, hey, what do they say, hitting your head up against a brick wall because you just can't figure it out. But the speed to getting to those answers and the speed to resolving some of those issues is to find somebody who's done it before, right? And so to me, I'm leading this to the LTA, right? To understand what can they get from LTA that will assist them in understanding how to get from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 and beyond.